How's it going? Welcome back to the Marvel Snap video here on YouTube. Today's gonna be a little bit different than the normal deck highlight videos I've been doing on the channel. We're gonna be taking a look at 3 different cards from Marvel Snap and how they impact some probabilities when it comes to how your deck plays out during gameplay. For those that aren't familiar with my background, before I was a full-time content producer, I taught mathematics at both the high school and college level, having both a graduate and undergraduate degree in the content field. So without further ado, the 3 cards we're gonna be talking about today are none other than American Chavez, Quicksilver, and Domino. So these cards impact your likelihood of drawing cards on specific turns of the game past just themselves, the way their effects play into the cards that you see in a game. So specifically, Quicksilver and Domino are cards that fill out the bottom end of your curve, kind of guaranteed, with Quicksilver always being a 1-drop for 2 power that we can play on 1, and Domino always being a 3 power 2-drop that we get to play on 2. Chavez, similarly, is a 10 power 6-drop that we're guaranteed to have on turn 6. But the most important thing to know when we're calculating probabilities with these cards, especially with something like Chavez, for example, is the fact that we're guaranteed to see these cards on specific turns mean they actually impact our draws outside of themselves. So let's go ahead and take a look at a table that has a bunch of different probability distributions already calculated in here and explain what the numbers mean. So this first column that I have labeled normally, this dictates what the odds are of having a specific card in our deck on a specific turn. Decks are usually looking to do a particular thing in a particular order. For example, you'll have one 3-drop that's your best 3-drop to be playing on 3. So under normal circumstances, you're about 50% to have a specific 3-drop to play on the 3rd turn. Similarly, on turns 4 and then turns 5, you have these probabilities to have specific cards on those turns all the way through turn 6 here. Now, Chavez is the first one I want to talk about because the fact that she doesn't show up until turn 6 means that all of the draws in our deck before turn 6 when Chavez shows up are actually slightly more likely to appear. So when we are playing 11 cards that are not Quicksilver or Domino plus a Chavez, we are about 4.5% more likely to have a specific card on turn 3. We're about 5% more likely to have a specific card on turn 4, and we're over 6% more likely here to have a specific card on turn 5. Now, similarly, because Quicksilver and Domino take up guaranteed specific draws on turns 1 and turns 2 effectively, they actually have the inverse effect on the early turn. So if you have a Quicksilver or Domino in your deck, the odds of having a specific card that you want to have to play on turn 3 is actually about 4.5% lower. Similarly, having a specific card to play on turn 4, you lose about 4%, and having a specific card that you want to play on turn 5, you lose about 3%. So it is worth noting that these aren't huge changes in your likelihood to play a specific card on curve with Quicksilver and Domino, and there is some value to these cards in making sure that you have something to play on the 1st and 2nd turn of the game, which, speaking of, another probability that's interesting to look at is what if we have Quicksilver and Domino, and you can see here if 2 of our first draws over that first span of turns in the game are guaranteed to be Quicksilver and Domino, we're actually 10% less likely to be able to play a specific card that we want to play on 3 on 3. Similarly, if we're looking for a specific card on 4, we lose about 8%, and then for a specific card on 5, we lose about 6%. But there's also other things to consider too, rather than just looking at one specific card when it comes to talking about Quicksilver and Domino. For example, in theory, there is a deck that you could build where you have Quicksilver as your only 1-drop, you have Domino as your only 2-drop, and then the rest of your deck is more expensive cards, you know, multiple 3s, multiple 4s, multiple 5s, multiple 6s. So they have a neat deck building kind of restriction design that you could implement on yourself, where you're kind of guaranteed to have a range of more expensive cards in that mid to late game, and while still guaranteeing having cards at the bottom end of your curve. Similarly, we can take a look at some calculations where you have both either Quicksilver or Domino in this instance, plus a Chavez. And interestingly enough, on turn 3, if you have either just Quicksilver or just Domino plus a Chavez, you're actually equally likely to have a specific card to play on turn 3 that's not one of those. You're actually more likely still to have a specific card on 4, and you're more likely still to have a specific card on 5. And then finally, just for the sake of due diligence, what if you had all 3 in your deck? Your chances of playing specific cards on specific turns are a bit lower. At any rate, I think these cards show a great use of kind of the digital design space in a game like Marvel Snap. I think they present a really interesting deck building problem where you can use something like Chavez to make the rest of your deck more consistent in terms of which of the other cards that you're seeing, but you could also have cards like Quicksilver and Domino, which are maybe a little bit below rate from normal 1s and 2 drops, but they're guaranteed to make your curve fill out, which will add kind of a level of consistency to your deck over a bunch of matches, even if you're slightly less likely to have a specific card in those early turns. Being able to always play cards in the early curves also has value. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of the impacts that Quicksilver, Domino, and Chavez can have on your decks during building in Marvel Snap, and how likely the rest of your cards are to come up. Are there any other deck building topics like this you'd like to see me cover about cards in Marvel Snap? Be sure to let me know in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you tap that like button and subscribe to the channel. There's a bunch of deck highlights up here, and there's going to be more coming soon, including tomorrow when I'm actually going to be showcasing a Chavez mid-range deck that I've really been enjoying in the format. We'll see you back here again soon for some more Marvel Snap action here on YouTube.